The sun hung lazily over Oakwood Park, its golden light stretching across the rolling fields like a warm blanket. It was a Saturday afternoon in early spring, one of those rare, perfect days where the weather seemed to agree with everyone's mood. The sky was an open canvas of blue, painted with just a few wisps of white clouds drifting like slow-moving thoughts. The smell of fresh-cut grass and cotton candy floated in the breeze. Laughter rang through the park like music. In the middle of it all, Emily Carter stood with her golden retriever, Max. She was 7 years old, small for her age, with shoulder-length brown hair tied up in a messy ponytail, and wide, curious eyes that always seemed to notice the things adults missed. In one hand, she held Max's leash. In the other, a bright pink plastic case filled with sidewalk chalk, every color imaginable, worn down from use. Max, her constant companion, was the kind of dog that made strangers smile. Big, fluffy, golden like the sun, and gentle as a breeze. Wherever Emily went, Max followed. He never barked without reason, never pulled on the leash, and never let her out of his sight. Emily's parents, David and Sarah Carter, watched from a nearby bench. Sarah sipped from a to-go coffee cup while David scrolled lazily through his phone, glancing up every so often to check on his daughter. It was their favorite spot in the park, under the old willow tree, where the grass was soft and the air felt cooler. Emily sat cross-legged under that willow now, Max lying beside her, his head resting on his front paws. She popped open the chalk case and selected a piece of deep violet. She stared at the ground, thoughtful. "What should we draw today, Max?" she asked softly. Max's tail thumped once against the grass. She giggled. "A circle? That's kind of boring, but okay." She leaned forward and began drawing on the concrete path that cut through the grass near the tree. The chalk screeched gently as she dragged it across the surface. She worked slowly, carefully, as if the shape mattered, as if the line needed to be just right. When she finished the first arc, she picked a lighter purple to trace over the top, then a blue, then white. She layered the circle with care until it shimmered in the sunlight like a chalky halo. "All done," she said, standing up and brushing her hands on her jeans. She turned to Max and gave a playful command. "Inside the circle, mister." Max stood, stretched, and casually stepped into the colorful boundary. He sat, tongue out, tail gently sweeping the dust behind him. Emily smiled and crouched beside him. "This is your magic circle," she whispered, voice serious now. "You're safe in here. Nothing can touch you." Max tilted his head, as though listening. Unseen by Emily, a breeze rolled across the field, gentle but strangely cool for such a warm day. It rustled the willow's long, leafy branches, which brushed the ground like nature's curtain. Emily's parents watched her in quiet admiration. "She has such an imagination," Sarah said, smiling. David nodded, still half focused on an article on his phone. "Better than mine ever was. I just smashed ants with sticks when I was her age." Sarah gave him a light nudge. "You still do that?" They laughed. It was just another lazy Saturday. Nothing felt out of place. Nothing felt ominous. Yet at that moment, Emily lay on her stomach, hands cupping her chin, watching Max breathe inside the circle. She hummed to herself, a melody only children seem to know. All around them, life continued as normal. Frisbees flew, babies cried, teenagers loitered near the basketball court. The park was alive, but as Max lay there, a subtle shift came into his eyes. His ears twitched. His gaze fixed on something distant, something beyond the trees where no one else was looking. Emily didn't notice. She reached for another chalk stick, a pale green one, and began drawing stars around the edge of the circle. She was still smiling. The magic had begun. Emily stood and dusted off her jeans. satisfied with her handiwork. The chalk circle shimmered beneath the sun, decorated with scattered stars and tiny swirls she had drawn along the rim. Max remained seated at the center, like a furry guardian of some ancient portal. His golden coat glowed in the light, making the scene look almost unreal, like a page from a storybook that had come to life. "You're the king of the circle," she declared with a giggle, hands on her hips. Max gave a single soft bark in response and sat upright, alert but calm. Other children nearby glanced over briefly, curious about what she was doing. One boy, holding an ice cream cone, whispered something to his friend, and they both laughed quietly before returning to their game of tag. To them, it was just a girl and her dog playing make-believe. But Max's demeanor had changed. He wasn't playful anymore. His ears perked straight up, and his eyes locked onto the same distant spot, in the tree line he'd been watching moments ago. His muscles stiffened slightly, not in fear, but in caution, like he sensed something others couldn't. Something coming. Emily didn't notice yet. She dropped to her knees and began drawing again, this time adding a pair of chalk butterflies beside Max's paw. "Do you like these, Max?" "I gave them rainbow wings." She paused and squinted at her work. "I think they're good luck." That's when the air shifted. It started with the breeze. What had been a warm, gentle current became oddly cool, like air from a basement or the mouth of a cave. It rolled through the park with such suddenness that people shivered and looked up from their conversations. Parents zipped their kids' jackets. Blankets flapped on the grass. Nearby, a girl's kite dipped and crashed to the ground. Then came the sound. It wasn't loud. Not at first. A low, distant hum began to build, so subtle that it almost blended with the wind. It wasn't mechanical or natural, somewhere in between, like metal vibrating deep underground. Most people didn't notice it immediately, but Max did. He stood up inside the circle, stiff-legged, his head turned toward the trees. A deep, quiet growl vibrated in his chest. Emily turned to him, surprised. "What is it, boy?" Max didn't move. He didn't even blink. His focus was laser-sharp on something just beyond the visible tree line. His growl faded, but the intensity in his posture remained. He didn't step out of the circle, and then everything began to stop. Conversations halted mid-sentence. A soccer ball rolled to a stop as children simply stood in place. The man strumming the guitar under the elm tree let a sour note hang in the air before his fingers froze, hovering above the strings. Mothers turned toward their children. Dogs stopped barking. Even the birds stopped singing. It was like the world had been put on pause. Emily stood slowly, sensing the shift now. She looked around at the park as silence fell over it like a thick, invisible curtain. The sound was gone. The laughter, the chatter, even the buzzing of bees. Gone. The only thing she could hear was her heartbeat and Max's gentle, controlled breathing. From the bench, Sarah and David rose to their feet. "Emily?" Sarah called, her voice unnaturally loud in the silence. Emily turned. "Mom?" She replied, but her voice felt swallowed by the quiet. Then Max let out a sharp, commanding bark that shattered the tension for just a second. Heads turned toward him, and then everyone saw what he had sensed long before. From the tree line at the edge of the park, something began to move. It wasn't running or rushing. It was deliberate, slow, huge. The humming grew louder. Emily stared. Her hand reached instinctively for Max's fur. He didn't flinch. He didn't run. He stayed in the circle. The world had stopped. That's how it felt. No wind moved. No sound rose. It was as though the park, once full of life and noise, had suddenly been trapped inside a glass dome. Every soul stood frozen, not because they were forced to, but because Something in their bones told them not to move. Emily clutched Max's fur, her small hand gripping tightly as her eyes remained locked on the line of trees beyond the field. Something was there. She didn't understand what. But Max had known before anyone. He always knew. A young boy standing nearby dropped his juice box. The soft thud echoed too loudly. It made people flinch. The noise didn't belong. Not anymore. Then the humming came again, louder now. It didn't vibrate through the ears. It sank deeper into chests and teeth and bones. It was like standing near a power plant or under a storm just before the lightning hits. There was energy in it. And pressure. Emily's dad, David, stepped. In front of Sarah, his eyes fixed ahead. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," she whispered, her arm halfway extended toward Emily. "Why isn't she moving? Why isn't anyone moving?" David took one step forward, but stopped when he saw a dot at the edge of the woods. The trees swayed in one focused direction, as if being gently pushed aside. A black shape emerged, massive and slow. At first, it did resemble a bare broad shoulders, thick limbs, hunched posture. But then it stood taller, straighter. Gasps echoed through the unnatural silence. It wasn't a bear. Its body was covered in something between fur and scales, glistening like oil in the sunlight. Its arms were long, too long, and its fingers ended in claws that dragged slightly behind it as it walked. Its head was oddly human-shaped, but its eyes, those eyes were wrong. No whites. Just deep, polished stone-like spheres that reflected nothing. It moved with eerie grace, its steps making no sound. With every step it took, the humming intensified. And with every step, more people froze, not out of confusion, but in something deeper, instinctual fear. Emily didn't move, but she wasn't crying. She just watched. So did Max. As the creature crossed the open grass, the air grew heavier. A girl near the playground fainted. A dog bolted loose from its leash and ran in the opposite direction, tail tucked under, yelping wildly. And still, the thing moved forward toward the willow tree, toward Emily. "Emily!" Sarah shouted, but it came out like a whisper. Emily barely heard her. Her eyes remained fixed on the thing approaching. But Max. Max hadn't moved an inch. He stood inside the chalk circle like a sentinel, his posture low and braced, his stare unbroken. The creature paused about 20 feet from them, its head tilted, unnaturally sharp, like an owl trying to make sense of something. Its eyes scanned the area, taking in the frozen park, the people, the families, the stunned expressions. Then it saw Max. And it stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. The creature stood still, staring at the dog inside the circle. Max returned the gaze without fear. Then, slowly, the creature stepped closer. 10 feet away. Emily's breath caught. 5 feet. David lunged forward, but something held him back. Force, or maybe pure fear. He couldn't reach her. No one could. The creature extended one long clawed hand. Its finger hovered just inches above the edge of the chalk line. Max growled low, not loud, but firm. The creature's hand trembled. Then. It froze. It didn't step forward. It didn't reach in. It stood there, as if an invisible barrier held it back. A tense moment passed, thick with impossible silence. Then the creature made a sound like a hiss or a growl, or both, and took one step back. It didn't cross the circle. It couldn't. Something was keeping it out. Something about the chalk. Something about the girl. Something. Ancient. Asterisk. Time seemed to stall. The creature loomed at the edge of the chalk circle, breathing heavily, though no sound escaped its throat. Its breath came in long, slow gusts, puffing out into the quiet like waves of invisible heat. It tilted its head again, studying Max with unnerving curiosity, as if trying to understand what this dog was. And what held it back? Max stood his ground, planted like a statue within the multicolored circle. His eyes never left the creature. The soft growl in his throat had subsided into a low rumble, steady, firm warning. Emily didn't scream. She didn't even move. She simply clutched, her hands together, whispering softly, over and over again. "Stay in the circle. Stay in the circle. Stay in the circle." Her voice trembled but never broke. The creature stepped sideways, trying to circle the edge. The chalk ring glimmered faintly where sunlight touched it, the colors unusually vivid. It lowered its long arms, fingers grazing the grass, claws twitching with frustration. It moved with precision, never once taking its eyes off Max. At one point, it tried to lower its body closer to the ground, as if looking beneath the chalk, searching for a weakness in the invisible wall. And then it lunged faster than anyone could have imagined. It slashed its claws toward Max's head. But before the claws even touched the edge of the circle, they stopped in knitter. Stopped. Not because the creature pulled back, but because something stopped it. A blinding flash sparked. At the rim of the chalk line, so quick and bright, it left a floating afterimage in the eyes of everyone watching. The creature recoiled violently, stumbling back, snarling. It gripped its hand in confusion. A faint, dark mark like a burn appeared where its claws had touched the air above the chalk. Gasps rang through the park. People began to murmur. The humming sound faltered, like a signal losing strength. A baby cried. Someone screamed faintly in the distance. But inside the circle, Max remained completely still. He didn't flinch when the creature struck. He didn't bark when it howled in frustration. He simply stood there, solid as stone, staring at the thing. As if daring it to try again, David gritted his teeth. "We have to get her out of there." Sarah grabbed his arm. "No, wait. It's not going in. It can't go in." David hesitated. He looked again at the circle. The chalk had cracked slightly at the point of impact, but remained whole. The colors still glowed. Whatever magic, luck, or force surrounded that space, it was still working. The creature circled again, growling louder now, more frantic. Its body tensed and twitched, driven by some mix of fury and confusion. Its hand hovered close to the circle once more, testing the air. It recoiled again when it felt the same invisible resistance. It wasn't just paint on the ground anymore. It was something older. Older than the creature. Older than the trees. Emily blinked slowly, a strange calm washing over her. She knelt beside Max and whispered again, "It's okay. Just stay inside. You're safe in here." Her voice had changed softer now, but sure. Max flicked his ears and gave her hand a small nuzzle. The creature finally stopped moving. It stood across from them, breathing heavily, its dark chest rising and falling. Then very slowly it turned, its head toward Emily. For the first time, its eyes left Max. The black spheres focused directly on the girl inside the circle. A long, cold silence followed. It tilted its head again, slower this time, not in curiosity, in recognition. As if it knew her. As if it had seen her before. The humming faded slightly. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature turned. It stepped away from the chalk ring, back across the grass, back toward the woods, and with one final glance over its shoulder, it vanished into the trees. The moment the creature vanished into the woods, the air seemed to snap. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was as if the world, for a brief second, exhaled. The heavy pressure lifted, the eerie humming went silent, and the frozen atmosphere around Oakwood Park began to breathe again. Birds fluttered up from the trees, calling out as if nothing had happened. Leaves rustled in the wind once more. Children cried. Some parents dropped to their knees, clutching their kids. Others shouted, ran, or simply stood there, stunned and wide-eyed, trying to comprehend what they'd just seen. Emily remained inside the circle, still kneeling next to Max. Max finally sat down slowly, his breathing steady now, ears still perked as he watched the tree line. He hadn't moved through the entire ordeal. His paws were still planted inside the chalk ring, which now looked smeared in a few places, but mostly intact. Sarah ran forward, tears in her eyes. Emily. Emily looked up just as her mother reached her, dropping to her knees and pulling the little girl into a tight embrace. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" she asked, running her hands over Emily's face and arms. "I'm okay," Emily whispered into her shoulder. Max didn't let it in. David arrived seconds later, out of breath. He grabbed Max's leash and gave the dog a quick, grateful pat. "Good boy. You're a good boy." The rest of the park was slowly coming back to life. A group of people gathered where the creature had first appeared, staring toward the trees. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Someone must have called. Probably several people. A teenage boy muttered, "What the hell was that thing?" A woman next to him replied, "It didn't feel real. It felt like a dream." But the burn mark in the grass near the circle was real. The scorched line where the creature had tried to break through, real. The silence, the fear, the stillness, all of it had happened. David crouched down beside Emily. "Sweetheart, do you know what that thing was?" Emily shook her head slowly. "No, but I think Max saw it coming." Sarah wiped Emily's face with the sleeve of her cardigan. "And the circle. Did you know it would protect him?" Emily looked down at the chalk. The colors had dulled a bit, rubbed from Max's paws, and the sudden flash of energy when the creature tried to enter. "I just felt like he needed it. Like I was supposed to draw it," she said softly. David and Sarah exchanged a glance. "You were supposed to?" Sarah asked, frowning. Emily hesitated. "It's like when you know a song before it plays, but you don't know how it felt like that." Sarah stared at her daughter, concern etched deep in her features. But there was also awe. A quiet, uncomfortable awe that made her skin prickle. Police vehicles pulled up near the park's entrance. Officers poured out, scanning the scene, hands on their belts. Some people ran toward them, frantically pointing toward the woods. Others were trying to describe the creature in confused, shaky terms. None of it made sense. Emily gently touched Max's ear. "He protected me. He didn't move once." David looked toward the trees, and something told that thing not to cross the line. "Something," Sarah echoed. They didn't know what it was, not yet. But they knew something ancient had stirred in that quiet park. Something that recognized Emily. Something that couldn't enter a chalk circle drawn by a child. And it wasn't over. The creature had looked back before disappearing, not in fear, in recognition. Emily's eyes narrowed at the trees, her fingers still brushing the chalk. "It'll come back," she whispered. David heard her. "What did you say?" She looked up at him. "Next time. It won't stop at the line." The drive home from the park was unusually quiet. Emily sat in the back seat with Max's head resting in her lap. Her hands moved gently through his golden fur, her eyes fixed on the chalk-stained fingers that had drawn something stronger than anyone could explain. Her parents didn't speak. Not yet. The silence in the car wasn't uncomfortable. It was processing. When they reached their neighborhood, it looked like any other summer afternoon. Sprinklers hissed. A neighbor waved. A boy rode past on a bike. Normalcy wrapped the streets in a cozy illusion. But Emily and her parents knew better. The world had changed in Oakwood Park. They pulled into the driveway. and Max jumped out first, sniffing the air and pacing once around the car before Emily joined him. Sarah unlocked the front door, glanced at David, and whispered, "We need to talk to her. Really talk." He nodded, still shaken. "Let's start with dinner. Then we ask questions." But Emily already knew what they were thinking. That night, over a quiet meal of soup and buttered rolls, David finally broke the silence. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "what happened today?" It wasn't just strange. It was impossible. Emily took a sip from her glass. "I know." Sarah leaned in. "Do you know why the circle stopped it? Or why it looked at you like that?" Emily hesitated. Then, slowly, she said, "I think it knew me. I think I've seen it before." David blinked. "You mean, in a dream?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "When I was really little. Maybe 4 or 5. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and it was in my room, not all the way in, just outside the window, watching me." Sarah dropped her spoon. David leaned in, stunned. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I thought it was just a nightmare," Emily said. "But I remember Max barking that night. He scared it off." Sarah rubbed her temples. "This can't be happening." But it was after dinner. Emily went up to her room. She sat on the floor near her bed, Max curled beside her. She stared at her old bookshelf rows of fairy tales, adventure stories, picture books. One book caught her eye. It was a dusty old volume she hadn't touched in years, given to her by her grandmother before she passed away. The cover was cracked leather, no title. She pulled it down and opened it. Inside were drawings, symbols, circles. One page showed a child kneeling beside a chalk ring. A dog standing inside. Emily's breath caught. She flipped through more pages, and each one revealed more symbols, protective markings, names she didn't recognize, stories of creatures that lurked at the edge of woods and watched from the shadows of dreams. Her grandmother had always said strange things growing up about the old watchers, about guardians who walk on 4 legs. Emily always thought it was just bedtime fantasy. Now she wasn't so sure. Meanwhile, downstairs, Sarah had pulled an old box from the back of the closet. Inside were photographs, some newspaper clippings, and a bundle of yellowed letters tied with red ribbon letters from her own grandmother. She hadn't read them in years. She untied the ribbon, carefully unfolding one letter. The ink was faded, but still legible. "If she ever draws the circle on her own, you must tell her the truth. It means it has found her again. It means the line must be held." Sarah's hand trembled. She read the line twice, 3 times. Her grandmother had always been a strange, superstitious woman. But now... David leaned over her shoulder. "What is this?" Sarah looked up at him, pale. "It's been here before. Maybe not to us, but to someone in the family." They both looked toward the stairs. Emily was upstairs with the book open in her lap, and Max lifted his head, ears alert. The wind stirred gently. And somewhere, far beyond the woods, something stirred in return. The next morning, Emily awoke with the old book still open in her lap. She hadn't slept much. Neither had Max, who'd stayed curled at the foot of the bed, eyes half open all night. Even in sleep, he guarded her. Downstairs, Sarah and David were already awake, surrounded by stacks of dusty papers, old photos, and the letters from Sarah's grandmother Agatha. Each letter unraveled more of the strange legacy that now circled their lives like a storm waiting to return. Agatha had written of the line, a sacred boundary drawn by a rare few who were sensitive enough to feel the old forces when they stirred. Children, mostly. They called it the instinct of the first ones, a gift passed down through generations, sometimes skipping many, sometimes returning when the balance was at risk. One phrase came up in nearly every letter. The chalk knows the circle, but the blood knows the door. David frowned at it. What the hell does that mean? Sarah didn't answer right away. She simply looked upstairs, where Emily was brushing her hair in silence. Later that morning, they sat, her down again in the living room. Emily hugged Max tightly, his tail thumping softly on the couch. He was calmer now, but still tense, his eyes flicking toward the windows every few minutes. David cleared his throat. Emily, have you ever seen that book before yesterday? She nodded. Grandma gave it to me the last time she visited, before she got sick. She said I wouldn't need it until I remembered again. Sarah's hands twitched. Remembered what? Emily shrugged gently. I don't know, but when I opened it, I felt like I knew the pages. David exchanged a glance with Sarah. Sweetheart, there's something we need to tell you. Sarah reached over and took her daughter's small hand in hers. My grandmother, your great-grandma Agatha? She used to say our family was connected to something very old, something from before cities and countries, and even names. Emily blinked. Connected how? She said that some people in our bloodline could see the Watcher's creatures that aren't supposed to walk our world. They wait just beyond the veil of what most people notice, and some of us could stop them from crossing over. Emily's face turned pale. Like with the circle? Yes, Sarah said. But it's more than just the chalk. It's something inside you, Em. Something ancient that remembers the line, the boundary that can't be crossed. David added, Agatha kept them out once when she was a child. Your mom almost had to. But now, they found their way back. Silence. Emily looked down at Max. I think I didn't just draw the circle. I think I felt it, like a string being pulled tight in my chest. I didn't know why, but I knew I had to protect Max. Sarah squeezed her hand. That string, it's real, and it means you've been chosen. Again. Emily's eyes widened. Again? David hesitated, then stood and brought over a photo from one of the old boxes. It was black and white, grainy, faded with time. A little girl, maybe 7, standing in a field. At her feet was a chalk circle, and inside the circle, a small terrier. It's Agatha, David said. She drew the circle too. And look at this. He flipped the photo over. Written on the back were the words, First time it came. 1927. Couldn't cross. Emily felt her throat tighten. How often does it come? No one knows, Sarah whispered. Sometimes once a lifetime. Sometimes every 100 years. But it always returns when the line begins to fade. And now, the line had weakened again. They all felt it. Outside, the trees stood still, but there was a tension in the air. The kind you only notice when the world holds its breath. Max suddenly growled, low and quiet. Emily turned to the window. The shadows beneath the willow tree were darker than they should have been. Asterisk. That night, the wind returned, not the gentle kind that nudges wind chimes or stirs the curtains. This wind was colder, low, constant, and whispering through the trees like something alive. It brushed against the windows of Emily's house, rattling the panes, curling around the walls like fingers seeking entry. Emily stood in her bedroom, staring out at the darkened yard. She had drawn another circle earlier that evening, this time on the floor beside her bed. Max had curled up inside it again, his eyes flicking toward the window with unblinking awareness. Do you feel it too? She whispered. Max didn't bark. He didn't move. He just watched. Downstairs, David and Sarah had locked every door and checked the windows twice. Candles flickered on the kitchen counter, not for power, but for presence. A tradition from Agatha's letters. The light reminds the old ones that we remember. She had written, but memory didn't stop what was coming. around 1:12 a.m. Emily heard it. The humming, the same bone-deep resonance that had filled Oakwood Park the day before. Only, now it was right outside her house. The air thrummed with it, vibrating in her bones, calling not like a sound, but like a memory that demanded to be felt. Max stood, not growling, not barking. Just ready. Emily walked to the window and looked out. The shadow was back, but this time, it didn't lurk at the edge of the trees. It was on the lawn. Tall, hollow-eyed, arms too long. Its outline wavered like heat over asphalt, as if it weren't entirely real, but it was. It was watching her again, not with rage, but with something worse. Expectation. It tilted its head. And for the first time, it spoke, not aloud, not with sound, but inside her. You remembered. You drew the line. Emily's knees buckled slightly. But you are the line. Her breath caught. The humming grew louder. Downstairs, a glass shattered. Sarah screamed. David shouted her name. The air was trembling, and every picture on the wall began to rattle in their frames. The lights flickered. Emily took a single step back, and the creature advanced. It didn't walk. It simply glided, as if it had always been in motion, and had only now become visible. Its form reached the porch. Emily ran down the stairs. Into the living room. David was holding Sarah, who was breathing heavily on the floor. The door had blown open. The wind howled into the house, tossing papers, snuffing out candles. Then it entered, but not like before. It crossed the threshold, not physically, not fully, just enough. A hand, a voice, a shape moving through the space where it shouldn't exist. The line had failed, or maybe it had just moved. Emily stepped forward. Stop, she screamed. The thing turned to her. She held out her arms. Her hands trembled. You can't take him, she said. You can't take my family. The creature stared, expression unreadable. You said I'm the line, Emily said, her voice firmer now. Then I'll draw it again. And she did, with no chalk in her hands. No markings on the floor. She simply stepped forward, and the house pulsed. Wave of invisible force spread out from her chest, like a ripple in water. Every candle flickered back to life. The wind died. The glass on the floor stopped rattling, and the creature froze. Its form flickered, crunched in on itself, and then vanished. Gone like mist, before morning. Max barked once. Just once. Loud and sure. Sarah gasped, and sat up. David held her tight. Emily stood in the center of the room, still glowing faintly from within. The house was quiet. The humming was gone. The line had held, because she had become it. Not Dingaway, just the next one in. The bloodline. She was the guardian now. A week later, the park was full of laughter again. Children ran through the grass. Dogs chased frisbees. The sky was bright blue. And on the sidewalk near the trees, a faint circle of colored chalk still clung to the concrete, faded, cracked, but never washed away by the rain. Because some lines don't erase, not when they're drawn by the right hands, and not when the world still needs someone to remember.